Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. I'm going to give you guys a quick rundown of my recommendations for polling on the first half banners for patch 3.6. In case you're unaware, the first patch half banner is Nilou plus Nahida, both of their first reruns, which is actually interesting to me. And is this the first banner that actually had two characters have their first reruns? I'm not entirely sure, but do let me know down in the comments below if that's the case. Regardless, we're going to be going through three main charts in this video. We're going to be going through a Nilou chart. Let's say you want to invest in your Nilou's bountiful core damage. I'm going to have a chart for that. After that, we're going to talk about Nahida, and the chart's really going to be going over Nahida's damage as well as what she kind of provides for the team, and my recommendations on Nahida's progression. And finally, let's say you actually want Nahida and Nilou, which, you know, a lot of us are going to do because the two of them work amazingly well together. Well, I'm going to have a chart for that as well with Nahida plus Nilou. We're actually going to start with Nilou's chart, and we can see here that if we start off with a Constellation 0, Nilou with the Iron Sting, and with Nilou having an HP build with the 2-piece Tenacity plus 2-piece new HP percent artifact set. And finally, we have a teammate who is going to be the main one that's on field with as much elemental mastery as possible, who will also be using the 4-piece Paradise Lost. This way we can keep track of how much damage Nilou gains as well as how much damage that teammate gains through investing further into Nilou. And I'm actually just going to pretty up this chart a little bit real quick.
2,000 years later.
There we go. So we can see this section is for Nilou's bountiful core damage. This is how much damage she does per bountiful core that she generates. And finally, we have the main on-field teammates' bountiful core damage, which is how much damage they do from the bountiful cores they generate. Starting off, the biggest actual upgrade you can get for both Nilou as well as for the teammates' bountiful core damage is the Refinement 1 Key of Kjah-Nisut by about 40%, and it jacks up the teammates' bountiful core damage by a very healthy 16.5%. Up next is the plus 6 seconds to Tranquility Aura. Now this one is very nice as well because you will gain a significant amount of additional Nilou cores due to the way that, you know, obviously her Tranquility Aura lasts for 50% longer, so you're going to get 50% more Nilou cores as well. This is an incredible constellation for Nilou, and it actually has a bit of utility outside of Nilou's bountiful core teams, which is vaping Daya's kit. But right now that's kind of a meme, but perhaps in the future it will become a little bit more reliable. But for now, you know, I wouldn't really factor that into one of the selling points of it. So despite this not actually directly increasing each bountiful core's damage for Nilou, this will indeed still provide your team with a significant amount of additional bountiful cores, therefore boosting your team's damage by a reasonable amount. But do keep in mind that your ultimate goal is to have a teammate trigger as much bountiful cores as possible, because they're going to be the ones running a ton of elemental mastery as well as the 4-piece Paradise, whatever it's called. So Constellation 2 is also really incredible. Now this calculation already took into consideration the Deepwood Memories 4-piece 30% resistance shred, and as such it's still though a very healthy 16% increase to the bountiful core damage generated by this entire team. Now it is worth noting that the first bloom that hits the enemy does not gain the resistance shred, so these are for blooms after the first bloom, which don't worry, you will be generating a ton of blooms with Nilou bloom teams. That's the whole point of it. So yeah. So up next we have her additional constellations. None of these actually increase the bountiful core damage, and this guide is not about a Hydro damage Nilou. If you are gunning for a Hydro damage Nilou, you are probably a whale, and you're going to get her to Constellation 6 Refinement 5, or at least Constellation 6, regardless of what I tell you. So yeah, but her Constellations 3 through 6 are all for making her a decent Hydro DPS damaging character, especially to have a super nuke with her Constellation 6. Personally, if you are more risk averse, you should, as amazing as the Key of Kjah-Nisut is on Nilou, if you are risk averse, Constellations 1 and 2 will provide guaranteed gains. the Constellation 1 is a very nice quality of life. Constellation 2 is a very significant damage increase. However, if you just want the biggest increase to Bountiful Core damage for the least amount of Primogems, the Refinement 1 Key of Kjah-Nisut is definitely going to be a great choice. Alright, up next, let's talk about Nahida. So, I'm going to quickly run through the rough damage gains that you can expect from upgrading your Nahida, starting with the Refinement 1 1000 Floating Dreams, which is a 20% increase to Nahida's overall damage, which is actually very good in comparison to the Sacrificial Fragments at least. But do keep in mind that if all you care about is jacking up Nahida's damage, the Widsith is, going to be a highly competitive weapon. It's always been a really incredible weapon for Catalyst users, and it makes 5-star Catalyst hard to compete with the Widsith. But that in mind, the Widsith obviously has tons of issues, being RNG as well as having a lot of downtime. So yeah, 1000 Floating Dreams is indeed a good option for Nahida. But you still may want to think twice about it, because her Constellations 1 and 2 are both incredible. In particular, let's start with Constellation 1. Obviously, we're going to go in order. Constellation 1 adds 1 teammate to the teammate counter of Nahida's Elemental Burst. And in most teams where you care about Nahida's damage, you are not running a Pyro character, so therefore you actually gain the 1 Pyro character buff, which is a significant amount of bonus damage to her Tri-Karma Purification spread damage. And on top of that, it also decreases your tick interval. If you do want to try using Melt Ganyu with support Nahida, the Constellation 1 helps a ton with that, as it reduces the tick interval, therefore making it much easier to actually not have to worry about timing Ganyu's charge shots with Nahida's, TKP ticks to re-trigger burning. So up next is her Constellation 2, which adds 30% defense shred with Quicken, as well as 20% Bloom crit. And both of these are rare multipliers. It will increase aggravate/spread damage by roughly 17.65%, and it will increase Bloom damage by just 20% on average, thanks to the fact that it's 20% crit to do twice as much damage. This is an incredible constellation that I do recommend going for if you do plan to stick with Nahida and Dendro teams for a while. Now her next constellations really just increase her own damage up until Constellations 3, 4, and 5. Really the gains get smaller and smaller up until you get to Constellation 6. It really changes her as a character by a lot, because then you are highly rewarded for staying on field to do 6 basic attacks. For those that are curious, Constellation 6 Karmic Oblivions, they have standard ICD, so you will get 2 spreads and 4 non-spreads, assuming you output these as quickly as possible. And yeah, as we can see just here, it will do roughly 254,000 damage just right out of the box with her Constellation 6 to all targets linked together, so it's a very powerful Constellation 6. You can obviously get her weapon to Refinement 5. The 2 element mastery that it provides to the entire team per refinement is obviously a joke, but the damage that it provides for Nahida's personal damage is in line with most refinement upgrade 5-star weapons, which is about 4% per refinement. So yeah, my personal advice is go for Constellations 1 and 2, and then go for the Refinement 1 1000 Floating Dreams. At least that would be the order that I would go in for Nahida if I were to choose. But for those of you that only have enough for perhaps just, one round of 5 stars, and you just want the biggest bang for your buck, as well as the small 40 elemental mastery buff, do feel free to go for the 1000 Floating Dreams. It's hard to go wrong with this weapon, especially for Nahida, given how unconditional it is, as well as the small but welcome 40 elemental mastery buff to your team. So I have one more section for you guys that are pulling for both Nahida and Nilou, specifically for a Nilou team. Let's say you have a Constellation 0 Nilou, and you also plan to get Constellation 0 Nahida for this team, then you are going to be looking at roughly a 7.9% gain in damage for the main trigger of the Bountiful Cores, who's going to be on field and therefore benefiting from Nahida's 250 elemental mastery buff to the team. They're going to get about 8% more damage thanks to that 250 elemental mastery. Now you also obviously have things that aren't really measured by this chart, which are how many more blooms they can do, because Nahida really does enable a lot of additional blooms thanks to the way that her elemental skill applies 1.5 gauge of Dendro on the enemy every well, 2.5-ish seconds. So after you've gotten your Nilou plus Nahida team, then I would actually recommend gunning for the Refinement 1 Key of Kjah-Nisut as the most immediate bang for your buck. If you are able to get it in the roughly average 100 pulls, then you are sitting pretty and you're going to be gaining a pretty good teammate Bountiful Core gain in damage primo percent ratio. As we can see, it's the lowest one on this chart at 1144 Primogems per percent gained for that teammate's Bountiful Core damage. So up next, I would personally go for Nahida's Constellation 2. As we can see, this will increase the damage of this team by 20% all across the board, and this is a multiplier that is completely untouched by any other multiplier in the game, so there's no diminishing returns currently for being able to have your Bountiful Cores crit. This will also give you Constellation 2 Nahida, which is incredible on other teams as well. Afterwards, if you want to buff your Nilou team, then you should go for Nilou's Constellation 2 in order to gain another roughly 16% damage increase from the Resistance Shred, as well as to gain Nilou's Constellation 1, which provides a lot of additional nice quality of life thanks to the increased Tranquility Auras, as well as more Nilou blooms because, well, Nilou will have the Tranquility Aura up more of the time. Now, in case you were curious and you did end up getting the Refinement 1000 Floating Dreams, as we can see, the damage increase for it is a little bit pathetic at only 2.17% for Nilou's bloom damage and less than 1% for Nahida's, or for the teammate's bloom damage, the main on-fielder who's going to be triggering the blooms, preferably, you know, a character that's Hydro or a character infused with Hydro. And you're going to see here that the Primogems per percent now is absolutely disastrously bad, which is right here, 19,000. In comparison to the previous ones, which were roughly between 1 and 2,000-ish, this is comically high. Now, after that, the only ways you can really improve the bloom damage itself are to get refinements on the weapons, and we can see going up to Refinement 5 Key of Kjah-Nisut will indeed lead to a reasonable increase in damage, but the Primogems per percent gained is absolutely atrocious here. And just for fun, we can see that if we actually bring up the Refinement 1000 Floating Dreams up to Refinement 5 to get that colossal 8 Elemental Mastery team buff through having 4 refinements, we can see here that we're gaining 0.15% more damage thanks to that Elemental Mastery, and it will cost you 461,000 Primogems to gain 1% of damage. Obviously, it's not going to be worth it for this team to get refinements on the 1000 Floating Dreams. So this is my personal order of progression for if I were to pull from scratch for a Nilou Bloom team. And yeah, hopefully these charts were helpful. I had an individual section for Nahida, an individual section for Nilou, and finally a section for both Nilou plus Nahida. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.